One of the strongest instructional activities a teacher does is help students who are very concrete move to the abstract level. In the next video clip, you're going to see a model of mental models, teachers creating models that take an abstract concept and make it concrete to help your students cross that bridge. When you're ready then to introduce the content for the day, we always stress that you use a mental model to foreshadow or to introduce the content that you're going to be sharing. A mental model bridges the concrete to the abstract. For those of you who have been in the classroom more than 2 weeks, you've already learned that there are some kids in your class who are very, very concrete, very literal. You say, I'm going to take off my math hat now and put on my English hat, and one of your students says, but you're not wearing a hat, because they don't get the abstraction of metaphor. From 3rd grade on, we teach at an abstract level. Whatever concepts we're teaching, in 3rd grade is when we start teaching about government. You can't put government in a wheelbarrow. It's not the mailman, you know, think of primary. You're learning about cows and mailmen, and they're all very concrete concepts. As soon as we start going abstract, we can really start losing students at that point. As classroom teachers, if we design that we introduce the abstract concept concretely, that we're building that bridge. So we're saying, oh, you may not get this, but if you walk with me here, you will absolutely get it, absolutely get it. So a mental model can be a picture, it can be a metaphor, it can be a piece of video, it can be an analogy. How much is our national debt right now? Somebody call it out. What do you think? Who even knows, right?
$1 trillion.
1 trillion? I wish. I think it's about 12 trillion. Why don't we, as functioning adults, know what the deficit is? Because that's a number even you can't get your head around. And I'm going to prove it to you right now. Your building principals are very generous. They just gave you $1 trillion to spend. But as all principals do, they put that little caveat on it. You are only allowed to spend $1 million a day. All right, so you're spending $1 trillion. You're spending it at the rate of $1 million a day. Let's say it's year 0. Right, we're in the year 2017. Let's say it's year 1 of this millennium. How many years is it going to take you to spend that money? Go ahead, I'll give you a couple seconds to think about it. You're functioning adults with good math skills. $1 trillion, spending it $1 million a day, how many years is it going to take you to spend? All right, start giving me some ideas. I'm going to be a continuum here. Somebody give me, what's the first thing that comes in your mind? How many years? Spend $1 trillion.
333 years.
333 years. More or less than Andreas said?
More.
More. How much more then? How far do I have to go?
A lot more.
A lot more.
Yeah,
1,000 years. Christina, we got 333, we got 1,000, 1,000 years? 900 years. Okay? So it's 2017, right? If I started spending $1 million a day in year 1, and it's 2017, I still have 737 years left to shop. That's $1 trillion. $1 trillion in $100 bills. $1 million is 4 inches. $1 billion is a football field. Tightly stacked $100 bills. $1 trillion is 64 miles. Think of where you are now and where 64 miles from you. That gives you concrete measurement to think of $1 trillion, because $1 trillion is just that big. So when Tony and I work with schools, they all jump on this mental model. And you already have them in your schools. You do it in your lessons. What we suggest is that whatever you're teaching, you always think of what could be the mental model. What I would challenge you to do when you're talking, when you're at lunch, when you're talking to other teachers, is if you know you're going to teach a lesson, let's say you're teaching commutative or associative property, that's what you know your lesson is going to be next, and you haven't come up with a good mental model, and that's okay. We're not 100% creative all the time. That's why teaching is a collaborative sport. Talk to other teachers. What do you do? What do you do? What do you do? Go online. Talk to your friends online. What do you do? What do you do? Build a library of mental models, because guess what? Next year, you're teaching the same lesson, and you can go, check, already did that. I want you to come up with 2 mental models that you've either used or seen that you think are good ones to share, because right now you're helping grow the other colleagues in this training. So Christina, thanks for coming up. I think I've seen this guy before. Tell me about him, about your mental model.
Yeah, you probably have. So in our team, we recognized that all of us had already known what the Gallon Guy was because we've seen him in many, many schools. He's around, and so Gallon Guy is to represent measurements. And so we have 2 cups in a pint, and 2 pints in a quart, and 4 quarts in a gallon. And this mental model really helps represent that in the students' heads, and really gets that idea concrete and really allows them to see that. We also did this because oftentimes I work in 4th grade, and in our 4th grade team, it's something that we use very frequently and see around multiple schools.
We learn a lot. A lot of learning comes in through our peripheral vision, through our visual. We're not even paying attention to it. We don't know it. So that's what I love about mental models that are displayed like this, Christina, is that the kids can see them even after they're done. So thank you.
So we had a hard time with this one because it took us just a minute to get our mind wrapped around it. And then,
So you just created this on the fly?
yeah, well, we were talking
Awesome.
about ones that we use in our everyday life. So one that we came up with was talking about the internet and how it's this big kind of, this thing that we all know about, but how do we explain it to someone?
Great.
And you always
Great.
hear people talk about it as a superhighway. So our mental model was that the internet is the highway.
Great.
That the different buildings they have addresses, so those you can visit them, and they're connected to the highway. And then the
Beautiful.
cars that you travel the internet in, we decided were browsers, so like your Google Chrome, Safari. Those are different ways you can choose to travel the highway.
So that's mental models, right? So we start our lesson with the what, why, how. We make sure we have a do now. We introduce our concept with a mental model.